On the 100th day, the school hallway exploded with chaos. Mrs. Ellis stood in the middle of it all, wearing that same old blue dress, the one with the tiny flowers that looked like they were fading away. But today, the dress was torn at the edges, stained with mud, and what looked like red paint splattered across it like blood. Kids were screaming, teachers were running, and the principal's face was as white as a ghost. "Stop this now," he shouted, but no one listened. A group of big kids, the ones who always picked on the smaller ones, had cornered Mrs. Ellis. One of them held a bucket, dripping with more paint, ready to dump it all over her. "You think you're a hero?" The leader sneered, his eyes full of anger. "This dress protest is stupid." Mrs. Ellis didn't back down. She lifted her chin high and said, "Bullying ends today, or I keep wearing this until it falls apart." The bucket tipped, and then, out of nowhere, a tiny girl with glasses stepped in front, her hands shaking but her voice loud. "Leave her alone." But just as the paint started to pour, something unexpected happened, something that changed everything. Let's go back to the beginning, before all this madness. Mrs. Ellis was the nicest teacher in Willow Creek Elementary. She had curly brown hair that bounced when she laughed, and she always wore bright dresses that made the classroom feel like a sunny day. The kids loved her because she made learning fun, like turning math into games with candy rewards. But not everything was happy at school. There was a big problem: bullying. It started small, like whispers in the lunchroom or kids stealing lunches from the quiet ones, but it grew worse. Little Timmy, who was new and wore funny shoes, got pushed into the mud every recess. Sarah, the girl with the stutter, had her books thrown in the trash. And poor Mia, the tiny one with glasses, cried in the bathroom almost every day because the mean kids called her Four Eyes Freak. Mrs. Ellis saw it all, and it broke her heart. She tried talking to the bullies, but they just laughed. She told the principal, Mr. Hargrove, but he said, "Kids will be kids. It'll pass." One day, after seeing Mia come to class with red eyes again, Mrs. Ellis couldn't take it anymore. She sat at her desk after school, staring at her closet full of pretty dresses. "I need to do something big," she whispered to herself. That's when the idea hit her like a lightning bolt. What if she wore the same dress every day? Not just for a week, but for 100 days. It would be her way to show how bullying sticks to you, like a stain that won't wash off. If I can stand wearing the same thing over and over, maybe the kids will see how hard it is to carry hurt every day, she thought. The next morning, day 1, Mrs. Ellis walked into school in her favorite blue dress with the tiny flowers. The kids noticed right away. "Nice dress, Mrs. E," said Tommy, one of the friendly ones. She smiled and said, "Thank you. And guess what? I'm wearing this same dress tomorrow and the day after, for 100 days straight." The class gasped. "Why?" asked Mia, her eyes wide. "Mrs." Alice explained, "It's a protest against bullying. Every day I wear this, I'll talk about why being kind matters. Bullying hurts like a dress that gets dirtier and dirtier, but together we can clean it up." At first, it was exciting. The kids cheered, and even the principal nodded, thinking it was just a fun lesson. But as the days went on, things started to change. By day 5, the dress was a little wrinkled, but Mrs. Ellis kept going. She shared stories in class about famous people who stood up to bullies, like how Martin Luther King Jr. fought for fairness without fighting back. The nice kids loved it. They started a kindness club where they helped each other. Mia even made a poster saying, "Be a buddy, not a bully." But the mean kids, led by Jake, the tallest boy in 5th grade, didn't like it. Jake was the one who pushed Timmy and teased Sarah. He whispered to his friends, "This teacher is crazy. Let's make her stop." They started small pranks, like hiding her chalk or giggling behind her back about the dress smelling funny, even though it didn't yet. By day 10, the lows came. Mrs. Ellis felt tired. Washing the dress every night was hard, and some parents complained to the school, saying it was unprofessional. Mr. Hargrove called her to his office. Maybe end this now, before it gets out of hand, he said. But Mrs. Ellis shook her head. No, sir. Bullying doesn't end just because it's hard. That night, she cried a little at home, wondering if she was making a difference. The next day, a high moment lifted her up. Mia stood up in class and said, Mrs. Ellis, because of you, no one teased me today. It was a small win, but it fueled her fire. Weeks passed, and the tension built like a storm cloud. By day 30, the dress had a small stain from spilled juice. But Mrs. Ellis wore it proudly. The school newspaper wrote about her, calling it the dress that fights back. Kids from other classes joined the kindness club, sharing cookies and notes of encouragement. But Jake and his gang plotted in secret. One twist came on day 45. During recess, Jake tripped Timmy on purpose, right in front of Mrs. Ellis. She stopped the game and made everyone sit in a circle. See this? She said, pointing to a new rip in her dress from kneeling in the dirt. Bullying leaves marks, but we can fix them with sorries and hugs. Jake rolled his eyes, but deep down, something stirred. His little sister had been bullied once, and he remembered how sad she was. The highs and lows kept coming. A low on day 60. The dress was fading, and some teachers whispered that Mrs. Ellis looked sloppy. She felt alone. But then, a twist, a surprise assembly, where the whole school clapped for her. Even the mayor sent a letter. It was emotional, with kids hugging her and promising to be better. But Jake wasn't done. He started a rumor that the dress was cursed, scaring the younger kids. Uncertainty hung in the air. Would the protest work, or would the bullies win? As day 100 approached, the school buzzed with excitement and fear. Mrs. Ellis planned a big event, a kindness fair, with games and talks. But on day 99, something shocking happened. Jake snuck into the classroom after hours and poured glue on her chair, right where she'd sit in the dress. The next morning, as she walked in for day 100, she didn't know what was waiting. Mrs. Alice stepped into the classroom on day 100, her blue dress swaying slightly, the tiny flowers now faded and the hem frayed from weeks of wear. The kids were already seated, but the air felt strange too quiet, like the calm before a storm. She smiled, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach, and walked to her chair. As she sat down, a horrible squishing sound filled the room. Glue. Her dress stuck to the seat, and when she stood up, a loud rip echoed. The kids gasped. Jake, sitting in the back with his arms crossed, smirked, but his eyes flickered with something else, maybe guilt, maybe fear. Mrs. Ellis froze, her face red, but then she did something no one expected. She laughed. Well, she said, brushing off the glue with shaky hands, this dress has seen worse. Let's talk about kindness. But as she turned to the board, a note fell from her desk. It read, Stop this stupid protest, or you'll regret it. The room went silent. Who wrote it? And what did they mean by regret? Let's go back a bit to the days leading up to this moment. After the emotional high of the school assembly on day 60, Mrs. Ellis felt unstoppable. The Kindness Club grew bigger, with kids like Mia and Timmy leading the charge. They made bracelets that said, Be kind, and handed them out at lunch. Even Sarah, who rarely spoke, started reading poems about friendship in class. The school felt brighter, like a cloudy day finally letting the sun peek through. But the bullies, especially Jake and his crew, were getting angrier. They hated how everyone was listening to Mrs. Ellis. On day 70, a low moment hit. Someone scribbled mean words on the classroom door, calling her dress lady and worse. Mrs. Ellis cleaned it off before the kids saw, but her hands shook as she scrubbed. That night, she sat at home, staring at the dress hanging on her chair. Am I pushing too far? She whispered to her cat, Whiskers. But then she remembered Mia's smile when she said, no one teased me. That kept her going. By day 80, the highs returned with a twist. The local news came to school, filming Mrs. Ellis and her dress for a story called Teacher Takes a Stand. Kids waved at the camera, and even Mr. Hargrove, the principal, smiled proudly, though he still didn't fully get it. The story went viral, and letters poured in from other schools, saying Mrs. Ellis inspired them to start their own kindness projects. One letter from a girl in another town said, I was bullied for my glasses, but your dress made me brave, Mrs. Alice cried happy tears reading it. But the attention made Jake's gang bolder. They started whispering louder, spreading rumors that the dress was dirty and gross. Some kids believed them, and a few stopped wearing their Kindness Club bracelets. Mrs. Ellis noticed the shift and it hurt, but she kept teaching, keeping the dress on like armor. Then came day 90, a suspenseful lull. During art class, someone spilled red paint by accident on Mrs. Ellis's dress. The stain looked like a wound across the flowers. The kids whispered, wondering if it was Jake or one of his friends. Mrs. Ellis didn't flinch. She held up the dress and said, this paint is like mean words. It sticks, but it doesn't have to stay. She washed it out that night, but the dress was wearing thin, just like her patience. The kindness fair was coming, and she poured her heart into planning it. Games, speeches, even a wall of kind words where kids could write nice things about each other. But Jake's crew had other plans. They met in secret behind the gym, plotting something big for day 100. She thinks she's changing us, Jake said, kicking a rock. Let's show her she's wrong. His friend Max, who usually followed him, looked uneasy. What if we get in trouble? He asked. Jake just laughed. She won't know it's us. Back in the classroom, the days ticked closer to 100. Mrs. Ellis started noticing small things. Her pencils went missing, her chair was moved, and once a dead bug was left on her desk. She knew it was the bullies trying to scare her, but she didn't tell the principal. Instead, she doubled down, sharing more stories about how kindness could heal. On day 95, a high moment came when Timmy, who used to hide at recess, stood up and gave her a handmade card. It said, "You're my hero." The class clapped, and even some of Jake's friends looked thoughtful. But Jake's smirk never faded. He was waiting for day 100, planning something bigger than glue. The night before the big day, Mrs. Ellis couldn't sleep. She ironed the dress, now thin and patched in places, and thought about the fair. She imagined kids laughing, bullies apologizing, and the school coming together. But she also felt a knot of worry. The pranks were getting meaner, and she'd heard whispers about Jake planning something epic. She pushed the fear away, telling herself, one more day, I can do this. The next morning, she walked into school, head high, ready for the kindness fair. But as she sat in that glue-covered chair and the threatening note fell to the floor, everything changed. The kids stared, waiting for her next move. Jake's smirk grew, but Mia, the tiny girl with glasses, stood up, her fists clenched. Who wrote that note? She demanded. Before anyone could answer, the fire alarm blared loud, sharp, and totally unexpected. The fire alarm screamed through Willow Creek Elementary, shattering the tense silence in Mrs. Ellis's classroom. Kids jumped from their seats, eyes wide with panic, as the glue on Mrs. Ellis's dress glistened under the fluorescent lights. The threatening note, "Stop this stupid protest, or you'll regret it," lay crumpled on the floor. Mrs. Ellis stood, the chair still stuck to her dress, and shouted, "Everyone, stay calm. Line up for the fire drill." But as the class scrambled to the door, Jake shoved past Mia, knocking her glasses off. She fell to her knees, searching for them, tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Alice rushed to help, but then she saw it smoke curling under the classroom door. This wasn't a drill. "Hurry, kids," she yelled, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. As they ran into the hallway, a figure darted past in the chaos, carrying a bucket of red paint. Jake's laugh echoed, but before Mrs. Ellis could stop him, the sprinklers burst, soaking everyone. Water mixed with paint, dripping red down her dress like a warning. Was this the regret the note promised? Let's rewind to the days after the glue incident built up. After the note fell and the alarm blared on day 100, the school was a mess of confusion, but the days leading up to it were just as wild. On day 96, the mood was low, heavy with tension. The kindness fair was almost ready, with posters all over the school and a big banner that said 100 Days of Kindness. Mrs. Ellis worked late, stitching a new tear in her dress and planning a speech about how bullying scars but kindness heals. But the pranks kept coming. One morning, her classroom door was locked, and she found a sticky note that said, "Quit now." She didn't tell anyone, not even the principal, because she didn't want to scare the kids. Instead, she focused on the highs, like when Sarah, the girl who stuttered, read a poem at lunch about standing tall. The cafeteria clapped, and Mrs. Ellis felt a spark of hope. Maybe her protest was working. But Jake's gang was relentless. On day 97, a twist came. Max, Jake's quieter friend, started acting strange. During recess, he gave Mia a juice box instead of teasing her. When Jake noticed, he grabbed Max's arm and hissed, "You're with us or against us?" Max looked torn, glancing at Mrs. Ellis, who was helping Timmy tie his shoe. That night, Max secretly slipped a note under her classroom door. "Jake's planning something bad for the fair. Be careful." Mrs. Ellis found it the next morning, day 98, and her heart sank. She didn't know it was from Max, but the warning made her hands shake as she ironed her dress. Should she tell Mr. Hargrove, cancel the fair? No. She decided. "I've come too far," she told Whiskers, her cat. "The kids need this." Day 99 was a high, despite the fear. The Kindness Club threw a surprise party for Mrs. Ellis, decorating the classroom with paper flowers to match her dress. Mia gave her a hug, whispering, "You're the bravest person I know." Even some of Jake's friends joined in, laughing and eating cupcakes. But Jake stood outside, glaring through the window. That night, he and his crew snuck into the school. They didn't just pour glue on her chair, they rigged a bucket of red paint above the classroom door, tied to a string. "She wants to play hero?" Jake muttered. "Let's see how she likes this." Max was there but stayed quiet, his stomach twisting. He wanted to tell someone but was too scared of Jake. Back to day 100. The fire alarm wasn't part of their plan. As the kids poured into the hallway, Mrs. Ellis helped Mia find her glasses, her dress dripping with water and glue. The smoke was thicker now, coming from the science lab down the hall. Teachers shouted, guiding kids outside, but Mrs. Ellis noticed Jake and his friends lagging behind, whispering near the lab. Her heart raced. Did they start this? She grabbed Mia's hand and led the class to the field, where the fire trucks were already roaring in. The principal was yelling into a megaphone, but Mrs. Ellis's eyes were on Jake, who was holding something behind his back, a lighter, a paint can. She couldn't tell. Outside, the kids huddled, shivering in the wet cold. The dress clung to Mrs. Ellis, heavy with water and paint, but she stood tall. "We're okay," she told the class, though her voice shook. Mia clung to her side, and Timmy whispered, "Is this because of your dress?" Before she could answer, Max broke away from Jake's group and ran to her. "Mrs. Ellis, I need to tell you something," he said, his face pale. But just then, a firefighter shouted, "Everyone back! The lab's on fire!" A loud crash came from the school, and flames licked the windows. Mrs. Ellis pulled Max and Mia close, her dress a soggy mess. as Jake's laugh rang out again. What had he done? And would her protest survive this? The flames roared from the science lab windows, casting an orange glow over the wet, shivering kids on the school field. Mrs. Alice's dress, heavy with water, glue, and red paint, clung to her like a second skin, but she stood tall, holding Mia and Max close. The threatening note's words, "or you'll regret it," echoed in her mind. Jake stood a few feet away, his hands behind his back, that same smirk on his face. Was that a lighter in his hand? Firefighters shouted, spraying water at the building, while Mr. Hargrove, the principal, ran toward Mrs. Ellis, his face furious. "This protest has gone too far," he yelled. "The school's burning, and you're still in that dress?" Before she could answer, Max tugged her sleeve, his voice trembling. "Mrs. Ellis, I know who started the fire." But just as he opened his mouth to say more, Jake shoved through the crowd, yelling, "Don't listen to him, he's lying." A firefighter grabbed Jake's arm, and something fell from his hand, a small, shiny lighter. The crowd gasped. Was Jake the one who set the fire? Rewinding to the hours before the chaos, day 100 had started with hope. Mrs. Ellis woke early, ironing her worn dress, its flowers barely visible now. She was nervous but excited for the kindness fair, imagining kids laughing and bullies like Jake maybe, just maybe, changing. At school, the fair setup was magical. Booths with games, a wall of kind words covered in colorful notes, and a stage for her speech. But the glue prank and the note shook her. She found Mia crying in the bathroom, saying Jake had called her useless again. Mrs. Ellis hugged her, promising, "Today we show them kindness wins." The fair began with a high. Kids played games, shared cookies, and wrote messages like, "You're awesome, Timmy," on the wall. Even Max joined in, hesitantly giving Sarah a high five. But Jake and his crew lurked, whispering and pointing at the dress. Then came a low moment. During the fair, someone threw a rotten apple at Mrs. Ellis, splattering her dress with brown mush. The crowd went quiet, and Jake's laugh rang out. Mrs. Ellis wiped it off, smiling, but inside, she felt a crack in her courage. Am I failing? She wondered. A twist came when Max, looking guilty, approached her at the fair. I'm sorry for what we did, he mumbled, glancing at Jake. Before she could ask more, the fire alarm blared, pulling everyone into the chaos of sprinklers and smoke. Back on the field, the lighter at Jake's feet changed everything. Mrs. Ellis's heart sank. Had her protest pushed him too far? As firefighters battled the blaze, a high moment broke through. Mia, clutching her glasses, stepped forward and shouted, "Mrs. Ellis didn't do this! She's teaching us to be better!" Kids cheered, and some of Jake's friends backed away from him, looking ashamed. But the tension spiked again. Mr. Hargrove grabbed Mrs. Ellis's arm. "This ends now. You're suspended until we figure this out." Suspended? Her protest, her fight against bullying, was falling apart. Max, tears in his eyes, whispered, "It wasn't just Jake. I helped." Before Mrs. Ellis could process his confession, a firefighter ran up, holding a singed piece of paper from the lab. It was another note, in the same handwriting as the first. "This is your fault, dress lady." The crowd hushed. Who was behind this? And was the school safe?